Welcome to the Human Experience Podcast, the only podcast designed to fuse your left and right brain hemispheres and feed it the most entertaining and mentally engaging topics on the planet. As we approach our ascent, please make sure your frontal, temporal and occipital lobes are in their full upright position. As you take your seat of consciousness, relax your senses and allow us to take you on a journey. We are the Intimate Strangers. Thank you for listening.
Norm, my good sir, welcome to HXP.
Well, thank you.
So, Norm, you have quite an interesting story. Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from? You were born in South Africa, isn't that right?
Born and raised. And I came to the United States when I was 26 years old. I had done my MD in Johannesburg. And I moved to New York City to do my psychiatry residency at Columbia, which I did. And I always wanted to understand the workings of the human mind. So that led me to the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland, where I did a fellowship, studied how to become a researcher, and I was there for 20 years. And during my 20 years, I would say my biggest contribution was identifying and describing and naming a condition called seasonal affective disorder. The recognition that some people suffer when there's not enough light around and that can be treated actually with light therapy. So that was really the work that I innovated there in Bethesda, Maryland.
So that's groundbreaking then. I mean, you kind of defined this disorder.
Well, yeah, I think my crowning achievement was when I became a Jeopardy question. So, they said, what condition, they said something about what do people, they said people suffer from this condition in the winter that was described by Norman Rosenthal. And then they said, what is seasonal affective disorder? So.
I'm going to put that on my bucket list to be a Jeopardy question.
That's my crowning. But anyway, yes, that was a very fun time of my life. Then I ran my own clinical trials organization. So I sort of understand about research and research design. It involved a lot of medicines, but it also involved alternative treatments and complementary treatments. It's always been a kind of special interest of mine. Light therapy was an out-of-the-box complementary treatment, and it's always been interesting to me to see how much can we do without medications. Mm-hmm. And I've had a practice now in Maryland for 37 years. And then I became fascinated by transcendental meditation. That's the last 8 years. I've meditated myself. I've done research on veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq with post-traumatic stress disorder with the TM, which is the short way of saying transcendental meditation. And then, of course, I've written 2 books on that subject, the most recent one of which is the one we are excited to be discussing, which is Supermind.
It's a fantastic read, actually. You've been covered by all these major stations for this book: ABC, Oprah, Fox News, Wall Street Journal, PBS, NBC. Why would you say TM is so much different than other forms of meditation?
Well, I think it's a little bit like exercise. If somebody says, well, I'm exercising, that person could be running, they could be swimming, they could be cycling, they could be climbing a mountain. Exercise sounds like a common thing, but each kind of exercise is very different. And that's a similar thing with meditation. We started off with a visualization. That's one kind of meditation. But TM is a very different kind of meditation, which involves learning from somebody who is a qualified teacher how to take a mantra that they give you, and a mantra is just a word sound, but to use it in a very special way that becomes quite effortless and automatic. So it's not a question of focusing, it's not a question of being mindful, it's a question of just letting this thing very automatically occupy your mind. in such a way that you go into a different state of consciousness.
What do you mean by that? So you mean that I just kind of let whatever happen?
Well, to some extent, yes, but there is this use of the mantra. So in other words, I could say, close your eyes, and let whatever happens happen in your mind. That would not be TM. Somehow the use of the mantra is very central to how the TM works. And one thing we know is that when you're doing it right, it shifts you into a state of transcendence, is the word you would use to describe it. What that is you're very relaxed, but your mind is very alert. And then you feel a disappearance of boundaries, where my body begins and ends, what day and time of day it is. These things become sort of irrelevant as you slip into this blissful, unbounded state of consciousness, is what it's been called. And when you've been there, you realize that that is in fact not an exaggeration, that's an actual accurate description.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I spend a lot of time meditating. I do my best to meditate every day. I don't have any specific practice. I just am in the moment, as it were. And but I find this interesting about the mantra. Can you tell us more about, is there a specific mantra that you would use during your practice?
People are given different mantras. They basically are word sounds that don't have a meaning to the Westerner who is learning. Maybe they once upon a time did have a meaning, but they don't currently. And it's not only what the mantra is, but how people are taught to use it. This effortless accessing, this automatic accessing of the mantra. And if you're somebody who really loves meditation and loves to understand the different kinds, you may want to just try it. I mean, you may want to just consult with the TM teacher and see if it offers anything to you that maybe isn't happening already. But maybe you're already more than delighted with what you're doing, and your day is more than occupied already.
Well, I'm speaking to one of the foremost experts on transcendental meditation, so I mean, you should tell me. I'd like to know. I mean, how? Okay, so let's back up a little bit. What would you say is happening inside the brain as far as brain waves, alpha, beta, theta? Where are we in our brain while we're using TM?
Well, that's a great question. What is happening is that a special kind of brain wave, alpha waves, begin to sweep across the brain, especially the frontal areas of the brain. These are soothing, self-reflective waves, and the frontal part of the brain is the part that has the decision-making function, the executive function for the mind. So all your decision-making areas are being bathed in these soothing alpha waves. In addition, there's something called coherence. And with coherence, what that really means is that different regions of the brain are operating at the same wavelength. And that means that when that happens in people, there is an association with increased competency. So it may be that your brain is being put at its most efficient, you see? That's another possibility.
Interesting. And I found what you said a little bit earlier interesting as well. It doesn't have to be necessarily that I'm sitting down somewhere. I can be exercising, I can be climbing a mountain while I'm practicing TM. Is that correct?
No, let me straighten that out. That was just to give you an analogy between different kinds of exercise and different kinds of meditation. When you do TM, you definitely are encouraged to sit in a comfortable place, close your eyes, and then they encourage you to get to a calm place in your head and then begin to think your mantra. And they say you should do it effortlessly and innocently. Now, what do I mean by innocently? By innocently, I mean with no expectation as to what this experience is going to be. So, no expectation as to how this experience will be. That is what they mean by innocently. And effortlessly, of course, is sort of self-explanatory.
Yeah, and how would you say that this affects the building blocks of making our brains better? Would you say that this heightens creativity, heightens intelligence, heightens sensory perception?
I would say all of the above. And I think the key is really to start by thinking about consciousness. You know the description I gave you of transcendental consciousness? That is what happens once you have just done a little bit of practice of the TM. That's what happens in the session itself. Then what happens is once you meditate regularly, they encourage you to do it twice a day. That feeling of calmness, stillness, in the side by side with activity and vibrancy, that extends into your daily life. So in one's daily life, one is simultaneously alert, awake, vibrant, and still and peaceful at the same time. It's a fascinating combination, and when you are like that, you are more creative, you are more effective, you understand people better, you listen to others better. Everything seems to become better. So that's why when I try to assess what do I call this state of mind that develops when you do your TM over time, what am I going to call this? The word supermind came to me because that's really what it is. It's the mind in its full flowering, in its maximum capacity and joyfulness. And that's what I describe, and I describe it not only through, the kind of scientific explanations we've been looking at, and I did a survey of more than 600 people, but also in the terms of vivid stories about people who have actually undertaken this journey and how well it's turned out for them. And some of these people are people you would never know. They're, anonymous people or, people who are just not well known. And some are household names. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was just about to ask you why you called it Supermind. But, I want to know, there's a sense of progression when you're meditating, right? When you first start meditating, perhaps you don't really feel anything. And as you progress, you start to move forward further and further. And then, as you said, you reach this state of transcendence. Can you describe this state of transcendence some more, please?
Yes, well, back to when you're meditating itself, and I think I did mention it, but let me just repeat it because it's so important. It's a state, normally when you're alert, you're not calm. And when you're calm, you're not alert. But here you are those two things together. You're alert and calm at the same time. And but the big deal with a supermind is that when you practice this for a while, it moves into your everyday life. So you have this benefit going through the whole day, and it's very, very delightful and very, very constructive. That's what I've called the supermind, when your transcendent consciousness filters into your daily life.
And how would you say that, as a practitioner of TM, how would you say that it's affected your everyday life?
Oh, well, firstly, other people notice it tremendously. It's made me more creative. The creativity just doesn't stop. I'm thinking of new angles at every turn. And very effective, but also very capable of settling down and relaxing, capable of sleeping, capable of enjoying myself when I'm with people people I care about, or just anybody really. I love people, and it's kind of just strengthened my connections with people and my connections with the natural world. Things can seem very vivid. I mean, I'll give you really a silly example. The other day, my bathroom is tiled with some rather old tiles. It's like an old design that if you went into a bathroom store now and you wanted to get a new bathroom, they'd say, oh, you're not going to use those. They're so 1970s or something, They'd say, you got to use this kind of tile or whatever. But all of a sudden, the tiles, they looked so interesting and so intricate and fascinating. And somebody said to me yesterday, everything old is new again. And that's how it felt, It felt beautiful. Whoever laid those tiles, they were very clever. They were very intricate. So, the way in which I think a lot of people live is that things soon get boring. This car, it's 2 years old, I have to turn it in for a new model. Or I have to change all the furniture in my house. All these paintings, they're so boring, I need to get a whole new set of art. It's a sense of getting jaded with the world and getting bored and having to get something new. And I would say at the sensory level, the world just becomes more intricate, more intriguing, and more rich and beautiful. And even ordinary things take on a quality of being rather special. And ideas flow, and you're very effective. And so you become more productive, you become more effective, you become more creative, but at the same time, you're just having fun. I'm having fun talking to you right now, even though I can't see you because my Skype is locked.
I mean, okay, so let's go a little broader here, a little broader scope here, and talk about how meditation is affecting the West. I mean, why do you think people are attaching to or moving towards meditation as a practice here in the West?
Well, I think that people are beginning to discover how much it can accomplish. I think that for a long time cultures were separate, and then we now have this cultural mix. Chinese restaurants have been around for a while, but then we got Thai restaurants, and we got Korean restaurants, and then we got Asian fusion, where the fusion between the West and the East you can see in the food. Well, I think we're having this fusion of cultures in our regular life, in the life of our minds. We're understanding that there's a lot of wisdom that's been developed in other countries and in other cultures for thousands of years. And now that we've been able to break down barriers, we say, wow, let's enjoy this, let's access this, let's use it. And they're doing the same with the Western ideas.
Yeah, it's really amazing how prevalent meditation has become. Would you say that TM is easier to learn than other forms of meditation?
Well, it's certainly easier for me. I can't speak to somebody else, but I really tried mindfulness. I tried to focus. People told me, concentrate on this, concentrate on that. And firstly, I'm not a very good concentrator. And secondly, I'm not good when people tell me what to do. Do you know what I mean? I'm much better if I'm left to my own devices. And that's more or less what happens with a mantra, because once you've been taught, and I want to make it really clear, the book is not a how-to book. If you get Supermind, you will not come out knowing how to do TM. So then somebody has said to me maybe, well, why should I even get the book then if I'm not going to learn how to do TM from the book? And I say, it's not a how-to book, it's a why-to book. Because TM takes 20 minutes twice a day if you want to get the full benefit from that. And our most valuable asset is our time. It's finite, it's precious. And before we're going to spend 40 minutes a day doing something, we'd better have a jolly good sense of what that thing is going to do for us. So that's why it's an explanation for why this investment of time and money is warranted.
You're a segue artist. You seem to have all of my questions there with you. How did you go from being the first psychiatrist to diagnose seasonal affective disorder to being a person who writes a book called Supermind?
Okay, I think that's a terrific question. And I would say that there are two things about me that have been the key to whatever it is that I've done. And the first is the capacity to look at the world in a fresh way. In the Buddhist tradition, they call that the beginner's mind. I look at things as though I'm seeing them for the first time. So I looked at the dark days, and I saw how they affected me after I came from South Africa, where I had had so much sunlight, and I came to New York and I saw the New York winters, and I felt down, and then spring came and I felt better again, and I thought, wow, this is wild. I never had this before. And it happened after a couple of years, and then I got to the NIH and they were studying light, and bing, 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 the pieces all fell into place. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Let's bring some of these people in. I called around, I asked local doctors, where are these people? Have you seen them? No, nobody's seen any people like this. So I thought, well, maybe, if you don't know what to look for, and if you're not open, your eyes aren't open, you're not going to see anything. So I thought, let me go to the media. So we ran an article. Wonderful journalist ran an article in the Washington Post. And I thought, it's a big area, the DC metro area. Maybe I'll get a half a dozen of these curious people who get trouble in the winter. Well, we got thousands of people. And that became the first group of seasonal affective disorder people. And then I brought them in the summer. They came into our ward on the inpatient service, and we watched them as the autumn proceeded. I mean, they didn't stay in the ward all the time. We brought them in for a week, did some tests, sent them home, watched them every couple of weeks. And one of my colleagues said, what if they don't get depressed in the winter? Won't you feel like a fool? And I thought, feeling like a fool, it's not the worst thing that can happen to anybody. This is a good shot. This is a good bet. Let's give it a shot. So what if I look like a fool? So anyway, they did. They all got depressed just on schedule. So it was two things. It was being willing to look at the world in a new way, keeping an open mind is our Western way of saying it, or the beginner's mind would be the Japanese way of saying it. And so that's the first thing. And the second is the willingness to be amazed, to say, wow, this is incredible. I am so fascinated by it. I've got to understand it better. I've got to research it. I've got to write about it. I've got to tell everybody about it. And those were the same principles that came into play with Transcendental meditation.
I'm fascinated by this idea. I've heard about TM throughout my life, and I can't say I've ever sat down and tried it. So what you're telling me is that you're not contemplating on anything, so you're not thinking about any specific thing, but you're not completely empty-minded either.
That's right. Yeah, the mind resists any instruction to be emptied. It's like they say, don't think of the color red.
Right, and then the first thing
it becomes the only thing you can think of.
Yeah.
So when I say clear your mind becomes full of the instruction to be cleared. I see a rag over my mind with Windex on it, sort of clearing my mind, You can't clear the mind, but if you think the mantra, automatically it takes you to a different place in the mind. It's been said, that the mind is like an ocean with huge waves on the top. And if you're on the top of the ocean, you'll think it's so turbulent, full of waves. But if you go down a mile into the ocean or a half a mile into the ocean, you'll be in the calmest, most peaceful place. That's what the mind is when you dive down as you do your TM. You go into this very, very peaceful, silent place, and whatever's going on the surface of the ocean is no concern of yours.
Is it a part of this sort of self-actualization that happens within yourself? Are you beginning to kind of realize who you are, what you are, or is it more of a detached state where you're kind of above it and you see yourself for what you are?
That's a really great question. And in one of the chapters in Supermind, I talk about engagement and detachment, a delicate dance. And, when I studied psychiatry, I learned what Freud said about what the purpose of life is: to love and to work. That's what we had to do. We had to know how to engage with people and build relationships. And then we had to know how to do our work and be very engaged in our work. And that was all good things to do. And it still is. Those are very, very important things. But what if a relationship isn't working? What about withdrawing if a relationship isn't working, or disconnecting from a relationship? Or if a job isn't serving you, finding something else that will work better for you. As Kenny Rogers said, you got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. when to get engaged and when to disengage. And so it's a balance. So I think that when I did when I did the questionnaire, I asked people, since you started doing TM, have you become more engaged? They said yes. Yeah, a huge percentage said yes. And I said, have you become less overly attached to things? And again, they said yes. They were more engaged, but they were less overly attached. When we get overly attached to something and we won't let it go, that's also not good. So it's kind of this balance. In the Buddhist tradition, they use the description of how you hold the reins of a horse. Not too tight, not too loose.
So then that's what brings us back to the word transcendence. You are transcending this sort of material realm.
Well, I think yes. I think that, I'm very engaged with my material realm. I work out. I work out with free weights this morning. I did Pilates yesterday. There's wonderful things to do with the material world. I can go out with friends and have a meal, and it's very joyful. So it's not like I'm some kind of ascetic monk, but at the same time, I try not to get over-involved in something. If something doesn't work out my way, I did my best, and it doesn't quite come out the way I want, I have to accept, the Bhagavad Gita says you have control over action alone, never the fruits. So you can only control what you can do. You can't control the outcome, because many times that relies on other variables that are outside of your control. So I would say, yes, I feel more self-actualized, I feel more engaged, and I feel less over-attached.
How would you say this affects your focus, your concentration, the things that, would you say that you are more focused, you have better concentration, you are better in your everyday, through meditation? And to alter my question a little bit, there are different types of meditation, right? So right. there is mindfulness. How would you rate TM versus other meditations? Is there a scale of meditation, or is it just a kind of variable, like what suits one person better to another person better?
Well, I think that there are definite differences that can be enumerated, the task that you're asking the meditator to do. In one case, you're asking the person to focus, usually on something that's going on here and now. In the other case, you're asking them to automatically access a mantra. So in the first case, what you gain is the exquisite moment-to-moment understanding of the present, of the now. In the other case, you're moving into a different state of consciousness that is going to reward you in a variety of ways. And in one instance, you're getting a sense of life as it really is, with its moment-to-moment changes. In the other case, you're getting a shift in consciousness that pervades your daily life and infuses your actions and your perceptions. So they're two very different journeys. And in my book, I've got a chapter on contrasts between these two different types of meditation, but I've also featured a couple of people who do both kinds and say, I got different things from my two different kinds of meditation. And I can even, it's quite short, I can even see if I can read one description. It's just about 2 paragraphs. Shall I read it?
Sure, yes, please.
Entertainment marketing consultant Chuck Bliziotis writes, I practice both TM and mindfulness meditation. They each serve unique purposes. I begin and end each day with TM. With it, I'm able to still my mind, de-stress, and start the day open and relaxed. My profession is entertainment marketing. A remarkable aspect of TM is that some of my best ideas come right after practice, while sitting quiet and calm, allowing my mind to drift. It is in this drift that I'm able to see the connectivity of what I'm working on and possible solutions or outcomes. It's still exciting each time it happens. I end each day with TM practice. It helps to let the day wash out, letting go, drifting off to a deeper sleep and a more rested morning. I believe that TM is directly responsible for sharpening my mind and intellectual memory, recall, and creativity. It is part of my foundation. Okay, so that's the first paragraph that describes TM. Let me just summarize. You're seeing de-stress, you're seeing shifts in consciousness, a drifting off, you're seeing increased creativity, you're seeing a growth of the mind, the supermind. It's in this drift I'm able to see the connectivity. My best ideas come right after practice.
So I mean, you would say that there is a dramatic shift in a person's character, who they are after using this type of meditation.
Yes, definitely, yes. I mean, you've got to do it for a while, but it certainly happened to me. That's why I wrote the book. I mean, writing a book is a lot of work. You don't do it frivolously. You only do it if you're convinced that this is a process worth explaining and worth communicating. Okay, so let me go on to his second paragraph, which is about mindfulness. He says, mindfulness works to facilitate clarity, focus, compassion, and truth. As humans, we have the tendency to create narratives, I more than most. And mindfulness allows me to examine clearly exactly what is going on, what is being said, and notice my reaction to it. All done by breathing slowly, rhythmically, and being aware of what is happening inside. This practice allows me to take a step back, listen to what is being said, and respond with compassion that goes to the heart of the issue at hand. It is difficult at times not to get caught up in the heat of the moment, as well as to face what we truly fear. Mindfulness takes courage to look at the world as it is. So there you see a very, very different practice, a very different outcome. He does both, so he finds both useful. The one that Supermind concerns is TM, because that's the one that grows the mind in the way that I have described in the book.
So Norm, I mean, let's get into the origins of transcendental meditation. Mm-hmm. Where I mean, the Vedas came up with this, right? It's a Vedic tradition.
Yes, it's 3,000 years old. It was developed in the Himalayas. It's the Vedic tradition that is before Buddhism and Hinduism split off. That is the Vedic tradition. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. And then somewhere in the 1950s, a monk who had studied under his master named Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the monk decided to take this wisdom and training and take it to the rest of the world from the Himalayas. So he began to understand how did the Western world work, and he packaged this meditation into a way of fitting it into a busy Western day. Then he figured 20 minutes twice a day should be manageable, and he distilled it down to that duration. And indeed, it seems to be a very successful formula.
You know, at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned that as a psychiatrist, you looked at methods that avoided using medication to treat symptoms, illnesses, mental illnesses. Mm-hmm. Would you say that you would recommend TM to your patients?
Oh, I have. Probably 20 to 25% of my practice meditates regularly.
And what would you say is the difference in, these conditions after the meditation occurs?
Well, let's take anxiety disorders. Some of them I've been able to lower the medications. People have loved it. I think of one young man, very smart young guy with anxiety problems. He introduced it to his wife, who's a very, very busy professional, and she meditates now. He does, she does, his father in another city does, because they've found it to be so valuable. So it's just a way of spreading it. But here's one reason why I write books, because if I'm with one patient, I'm teaching people one at a time the things that I've learned that are going to help them. But when I'm on a podcast like this one, then hopefully I can get this message out to lots of people, and I can scale up the impact that I have on doing good in the world, which is what I believe I'm here to do. So thank you for helping me to do that. And that also explains why I write books and why I love being on shows such as yours.
Oh yeah, you're quite welcome. And I mean, today is your birthday, so it's kind of a special day to be doing a show like this. Happy birthday!
Well, thank you. Yes.
I mean, Norm, where can people find your website, your work, and pick up a copy of this book?
Oh, sure. Yes. My website is Norman Rosenthal. That's just my first and last name, normanrosenthal.com. And of course, on my website, it's got all my social media. But just for the record, Dr. Norman Rosenthal is my Facebook page. That's DR for Dr. Norman Rosenthal. And then my Twitter is Doctor. Now, that just to make it complicated, that's DOCTOR, Norman. Of course, all of this is defined by what was available at the time when you applied for your Facebook or Twitter. And so
we'll make sure it's available to everyone who finds the show. We'll make sure that your Twitter and Facebook are linked in the show episode.
So come visit me on my website, my Facebook, my Twitter. I love engaging with people, and I'm really so grateful to be on your show on my birthday.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that, and a big happy... How old are you, sir?
Well, I'm 66, and before I forget, I should just tell people the name of the book once again. It's Supermind, How to Boost Performance and Live a Richer and Happier Life Through Transcendental Meditation. I'm 66, and the dominant feeling of the day is gratitude. And I'm just so grateful to be alive one more year, and well and happy, and just have wonderful people in my life that I just feel the luckiest man. And that gratitude extends to you for having me on your show and for engaging me in this really wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you, sir. I think that's a perfect note to close on. Guys, this is The Human Experience. My guest is Dr. Norman Rosenthal. His book is called Supermind. Thank you guys so much for listening.